This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stock Box interview. Joining us this morning is George Roach, the CEO of Premier African Minerals. Hello, George. How are you this morning?
Yes, hi, Mark. I'm fine and good to chat to you.
Yes, well, thank you very much for joining us. Now, last time that we spoke, you had completed 22 drill holes and 11 bore holes, and the RNS this morning stating that 27 and 28 holes are due to be completed shortly. So, progress continuing at pace then, is that right?
Yes, indeed. And I think that the 27 and 28 are actually now complete. At the time that we first drafted the RNS, they weren't. So that meterage is probably up as well. We're working hard and continuously at site.
Okay. Now, has the new variant of COVID, the Omicron variant, has that affected you at all, or the ability to get results back from the lab?
Well, in Zimbabwe and at the Zulu site, no, we're not affected. We're operating quite normally there. In South Africa, the independent laboratory that's doing the assay work for us has been quite badly affected by this Omicron variant, and they were put in a position where they actually had to shut their lab. Now, it hasn't reopened yet, but I do understand from my geos that they are considering when they can at least give us access to take out the residual material that is still there, and hopefully give us an indication when we can get this huge mass of results that we're waiting for from them.
Okay. But is it right you have had some results back, and this has helped you to perhaps understand your LIBS system and how accurate that is?
Yes, we have. They're limited, and they're it's a little difficult to try and compile representatively when you don't have all of the results that you're submitting. But in respect of part of the intersection in borehole 52 that we'd referred to when we first used our LIBS, we have been able to ascertain that there is a reasonable correlation between the result that has come from the independent laboratory and the LIBS result. It should be noted that the sample preparation method that was used at site and the method that is used in the compliant independent laboratory were not the same. And I think this probably accounts for a difference, which is not a particularly significant difference between the two assay results. Now, the most important thing is that we now have, as soon as we can get from the lab, that is, we now have some material that the lab has assayed that we can now use to also assay under the LIBS. And theoretically, from that same assay sample that the lab has looked at, we should get an identical result from the LIBS. If we don't, then we will understand the calibration that we will need to go through to make sure that the LIBS now becomes the instrument of choice and that it meets the objective of giving us a much quicker turnaround on actual analyses as we go into the new year.
Okay, so it's almost like you can do your own on-site analysis.
Yeah, Mark, there's always an independent referee setup that is undertaken to make sure you comply with your QA/QC procedures and so on. But I'd like to see that swing from 10% on the libs to 90% on the libs and 10% in the independent lab. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. It's going to save money and it's going to save time. It's going to give us all sorts of efficiencies.
Okay. And do the delays at the lab then also delay the DFS and the completion of it?
No, not at this time, because we've completed the larger diameter bore drilling at site, which was intended to give us material for metallurgical test work. At the moment, the detail processes related to the metallurgical test work are pretty well agreed. We are compiling the first sample, which is anticipated to be shipped to Germany before Christmas. That's around about 1.3 tons of material that goes out. We're identifying the mineral assemblage across the area that we think is going to be mined. So all the other work that's associated with a DFS, which is so much more than just drilling for resource, is all ongoing and getting a tremendous amount of attention at the moment.
Okay. Well, talking about the attention then, we did speak about this last time, that there were potential offtake partners conducting due diligence, and today in the RNS it seems to suggest that perhaps this has advanced slightly. Is that the case?
Mark, yes. I have to caveat this with by saying that there is no final agreement signed right now. The moment there is, it'll be announced. But the amount of M&A activity around, the number of discussions that we have been and are continuing to be involved in with some significant players who want to be part of this, give me a fair amount of confidence that I think we're going to reach an agreement. Now, I can't predict what an agreement is until it's done, but from Prem's perspective, we think that fairest is to fund the balance of the DFS program against a relatively small direct stake in the project and the right to increase that stake against mine build finance to secure an offtake agreement and so on. So the parameters that we'd like to negotiate are there. People are talking seriously to us. A number of confidentiality agreements are in place. Some DD is completed and some is ongoing. And I'm, I think that we're going to get there. I can't put a final timeline on it, but I'm fairly confident we're going to get there.
Okay. The RNS also mentions about the placing to raise 800,000. That's intended to lift any potential operational pressures, but also refers to the offtake negotiations underway. So could you give some rationale as to the placing?
Sure. I don't want to be put in a position where I have one of these parties that we may be negotiating with at the moment that can pressure me into concluding an agreement that may have something we don't particularly want in it or don't particularly like because they're promising early money. It all sounds very nice to have the early money, but I'd like to have a very good agreement linked to it. So I don't want to be put under pressure. I think it's prudent that we should do it. We can at the moment. It's not a particularly big placement, but it makes sure that we're not pressurized over the next couple of months while we try or while we do bring these negotiations to finality.
Okay. And finally then, George, just on the EPO, that's the exclusive prospecting order, you're expecting to start the first exploratory drill hole very soon?
Indeed. A rig has been moved and positioned at the first of a couple of outcropping targets that we want to drill. some of the remote sensing work we did, and I hope that shareholders take time to go and have a look at the images, because it's very interesting, the correlation that the remote sensing interpretation shows between where we know there is mineralization, where we are working in the Zulu claims, and the same heat map that you can now see in other places within the EPO area. And it really adds a lot more confidence to our belief that this thing it's a tungsten district. It's not just one tungsten occurrence at the old claims. So we still see huge upside on this whole project as we go forward.
Okay, well, George Roach, the CEO of Premier African Minerals, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mark.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stopboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.